Hello, fifth grade. We're going to get started with a brand new math lesson, okay? I'm not exactly sure if you guys have done any type of this division in the past with maybe Mrs. Tiffany last year, but we are on page 277 and 278, and this is called annexing zeros with dividing. Now remember, annexing you would think means crossing it out, but we've learned, because we've annexed other things in the past, that that is actually adding, okay? So what I want to do is I'm going to go over this one problem with you first, okay? If we were just to go ahead and averagely I'm going to tell you, divide 52 by 8, you're going to go ahead and say 8 goes into 52 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. Yes, that was supposed to be 4. 48, right? And then when you subtract, you would end up getting 4. That's your remainder, right? You would then go ahead and say remainder 4. You could then say 4 over 8, and then you would reduce that to 1/2. So depending on what you wanted to do, you would give the remainder part being 4, right? Okay. Well, annexing zeros means I want you to end up with a remainder with a different number, possibly a 0 at the end here, no remainder. Now, how you can do that is you can add a 0. Okay, so now how you do that is remember that if I put a decimal place there, it's the same value, right? 52, 52, right? If I added a 0 right here, I still have the same value, because remember, I can drop a 0 or I can add the 0 with the decimal place. The decimal place does not change 52, okay? But remember, you have to have a decimal place there. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and add a 0 here and a decimal. Now remember, we learned yesterday or the day before, you have to, when dividing, if you have a decimal place right here, you have to go straight up and add it in, right? That is when you have a decimal point in the dividend, but no decimal place in the divisor, right? So we go straight up. Now, what do I do? Once I add that 0, I can go ahead and bring down that 0, right? And I can do 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. And now when I subtract, I have 0. So I now actually have a basic whole number, not quite whole number because that's our whole number, but I do not have a remainder anymore because I added this 0 after the decimal place. Okay, see how this is working now? Let me go ahead and try another one. Remember that when we can place a decimal point after the 0, because it doesn't change the value, and all the numbers after the decimal place have to be a 0, okay? We can't add any other numbers, they have to be a 0, okay? Most of the time, this is the number. If you were to ask, the computer to show you 52 with decimal places, guess how they're going to show you? Decimal place 52.0, okay? So once we add this decimal place, we can then figure out our division problem. So we can now do that again, okay? Let's try another one. We're going to do 1A, okay? So we have 2 into 15, okay? So we know that 2 goes into 15 how many times? 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. I subtract, I get 1, right? Okay, but I don't want 1. I want this to be a 0. I don't want a remainder. So I put my decimal place, I add my 0, I carry my decimal place up into the quotient, right? Okay. And then I bring my 0 down, making this a 10. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. I subtract and I get 0. See how we did that? Okay, let's try another one all together. Okay, let's do 1B, okay? 1B is 4 into 58. Okay, so 58 divided by 4. Let's try it again. 4 goes into 5 one time. 1 times 4 is 4. Subtract, I get 1. Bring down my 8. 4 goes into 8 4 times, right? Because 4 times 4 is 16. I now subtract and I have a 2. I don't want you to give me a remainder 2. I want you to give me no remainder. So what are we going to do? Let's erase that so we have space. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add a 0, right? We're going to make our decimal place up there so we don't forget about it. And I hope that you can see that. I know it's kind of a bad angle, but there you go. You can see a little bit better maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. Okay, this is a 4, okay? Hopefully you can see that. Then I bring my 0 down. 4 goes into 20. How many times? 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. I now subtract, and what do I get? I get a 0. See how that's working out? Okay, so I want you guys to do number 1. We just did A and B, so you're going to do C through J. Okay? Now, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to warn you, all of those ones, you have to make sure that they do not have a remainder, okay? So C through J does not have remainders. You have to annex zeros by adding that 0, okay? So now let's try again. And this is where we actually have to add more than 1 0, okay? So now we're at 2A, okay? So we're going to have 4 goes into 37, okay? So how many times does a 4 go into 37? 9 times. 9 times 4 is 32, right? Oh my gosh, 18 is that. 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 36. Sorry. Okay. Yes, my brain isn't working. Give me a second. Okay. Now I'm going to subtract, right? I get a 1. I don't want that remainder. So I'm going to add that 0. I'm going to go ahead, extend this, and add my decimal place. I'm going to bring down my 0, and I have 4 goes into 10. How many times? 8. 4, 8, I'm sorry, 2 times. That's funny. My answer is 8. 2 times 4 is 8. I'm going to subtract. I get a 2, right? Okay. Still not working for me, right? So I'm going to add another 0, and I'm going to bring that one down, and that gives me 20, and 4 goes into 20. How many times? 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20, and I can subtract and get my 0. So in this case, I didn't only add 1 0, I actually had to add 2 zeros. See how that worked? Okay, this is called annexing zeros, adding the zeros, okay? That was 2A. Let's go ahead and do 2B together. Okay, we'll do it again. So we have 8 goes into 26, okay? How many times does 8 go into 26? It goes in 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24, right? Okay, subtract. I bring down, or I subtract, I get 2. 8 can't go into 2, so I'm going to go ahead and give me my 0. I'm going to give me my decimal place up there. Don't forget that decimal place. Then I'm going to bring down my 0, and I have 8 goes into 20. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract, I get a 4, right? 8 can't go into 4, so I'm going to give myself one more 0. I'm going to bring my 0 down. Now, as many zeros as I add here, guess what? I'm never changing that value of 26 because I put the decimal place right there, okay? That's showing. So I can add 4 zeros here and still never change the value, okay? But I can figure out how many times 8 will go into 26 by doing it this way, okay? So I brought down my 0. 8 goes into 40 how many times? 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. I will then subtract and I get my 0. So that means that 8 goes into 26, 3 and 25 hundredths, okay? Or you could say 0.25 to make it easier, but it is 25 hundredths, right? Because this is our tens place and our hundreds place, okay? So if you were to write that as a fraction, right, you might write it like 25 hundredths, okay? And if you were to change that and write it as a remainder, you would have had remainder 2, right? Okay? But we're going to go ahead and we're trying to get decimals, okay? How are you feeling about this? I hope you guys are doing okay. Okay, so 2, I want you to do C, D, and E. C, D, and E. Oh my goodness, that's not an E. Okay, that's an E. Okay, and then you're also going to do story problems 3A and 4. Okay, so let's kind of go over it a little bit for you. 3A says, last year during the period of 52 weeks, Mr. Bowman saved $2,444. What was the average savings of each week? Okay, so what would we do? We've got to figure out how much he saved each week. We know average is dividing, friends, so what are we going to divide? 52 into 2,444. Work out your problem, and that answer is going to be average weekly, right? Okay. Now, 3B says Mr. Bowen gave 1/4 of his savings to a missionary and spent 1/2 of his savings on a new refrigerator. How much money does he have left from the year's savings? Okay, so we could do one of two things. We can figure out he spent half of it on the refrigerator. We could divide it by 2, right? Okay, or we can do 44 times 1/2, right? Oop, I forgot a 4. Too many 4s. Okay, and get my answer. And he gave 1/4 of it to a charity, right? Or to a missionary. So then we would do the same thing. We can do 244 times 1/4, right? And how do we do these type of problems? Well, we've got to put them over 1 and then cross cancel. So it does help to divide, right? And we end up with our answer once we figure out, and we can cross cancel or we can cross cancel here. Okay, so there are 2 different ways that you can do the problem. Okay, so work those out, see what answers you have. So you are doing 3A and B, and that is all your math for the day. So don't forget to do annexing zeros when dividing. You're putting that decimal place there, and then you're adding that 0. So take a look at the box in your page just one more time before you get started. Read what it says there. Remember to include the decimal point in your answer, okay? And go through that. And if you guys have any questions about annexing zeros, please let me know, okay? So your assignment is 1, basically you're doing A through J, 2, A through E, and 3, A through A and B, okay? Even though we did a couple together, okay? That's it for math today.